I used to believe love was freedom, that if someone loved you enough, they would save you. But sometimes love doesn't unlock the cage. Sometimes it tightens the chains. And this is the true story of a woman who thought she was escaping abuse, only to walk straight into something far darker. A story where no one is innocent, where sympathy and horror exist in the same breath, and where the price of blind love was paid in blood, silence, and prison walls. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll be asking yourself one terrifying question. When a victim becomes a killer, who do we really blame? Before we go any further, if you've ever felt trapped, if you've ever been silenced, controlled, or broken down piece by someone who claimed to love you, then this story will hit close. Tap like to support real, hard stories that don't flinch from the truth. Subscribe if you believe justice, karma, and consequences always collect their dues, eventually. And brace yourself, because this isn't a revenge story that ends clean. This is one that leaves scars. People love simple stories. They crave neat borders. Good people on one side, bad people on the other. A villain you can point to, a victim you can defend. It helps the world feel manageable. But real life refuses to cooperate with that fantasy. Real life seeps through the cracks. It blurs roles. It corrupts people slowly, quietly, until one day they wake up and no longer recognize the person their reflection is trying to explain. This story lives in that gray space. It isn't about romance, no matter how much love is spoken aloud. It isn't even really about murder, no matter how violently it ends. It's about what happens when silence becomes a habit, when endurance is mistaken for strength, and when desperation finally finds a voice sharp enough to be heard. 4 years ago, in a tightly packed neighborhood on the edges of Lahore, where homes are pressed together like clenched teeth, and privacy is more rumor than reality, a woman lived a life that looked complete from the outside. Married, 4 children, a roof overhead, the kind of life elders approve of and strangers envy without knowing why. People would look at her and say she was lucky, settled, protected. What they didn't see was that each passing day felt like sandpaper on her identity, slowly rubbing her down until there was very little left beneath the roles she performed. Her husband wasn't the type of man stories warn you about. He didn't rage in public. He didn't leave marks that demanded hospital visits. His cruelty was quieter, more disciplined. It came in questions that weren't really questions, in rules framed as care, in suspicion disguised as love. His words chipped away at her confidence long before his hands ever touched her. When the beatings did happen, they were methodical, placed where fabric could hide them, followed by apologies that somehow blamed her for forcing his hand. He never claimed to lose control. Control was the point. He hit her to remind her who owned the room, the house, the narrative. She learned quickly that resistance was expensive. Tears escalated things. Arguments prolonged them. Silence, however, shortened the damage. Her body adapted before her mind did. Muscles tensed automatically. Breathing adjusted. Fear became a reflex, not a reaction. And still, every morning, she moved through her routine with practiced normalcy. Breakfasts prepared, school bags packed, buttons fastened with fingers that had learned to be steady. She smiled when neighbors passed, because in places like that, appearing intact is often the only protection you're allowed. Over time, her world contracted. Phone calls went unanswered because explaining felt exhausting. Visits stopped because excuses ran out. Even thinking began to feel risky, like letting a rebellious thought wander too far might invite consequences. She existed among people, but lived in isolation. And isolation doesn't stay empty forever. It fills itself with longing, with imagination, with dangerous hope. The rooftop was her pause button, not an escape, just a small interruption in the suffocating rhythm of her days, a patch of sky where the walls couldn't quite reach her. That's where she noticed him. At first, it barely registered. A young man on a neighboring rooftop, separated by a narrow gap of air and an unspoken ocean of rules. He looked longer than was necessary, not rudely, not timidly, just deliberately, as if presence itself was a statement. The next day, he was there again. Same time, same stillness, same attention. Her reaction surprised her. Unease gave way to comfort. Comfort warmed into anticipation. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her without expectation or judgment that the attention felt almost unreal. She told herself it meant nothing, a coincidence, two strangers sharing a skyline. But the mind is skilled at nurturing small exceptions until they feel justified. A nod turned into a wave into a smile. The smiles lingered, gestures followed, fingers moving through the air, shaping numbers carefully, conspiratorially. A phone number exchanged without ink or sound. No witnesses, no evidence, just a quiet agreement suspended between rooftops. The first call was stiff and uncertain. Her voice wavered, unused to being invited forward. His didn't. He listened without interrupting, asked questions that didn't carry traps. How was she, really? What did she want? What frightened her the most? Each question felt like a key testing the locks of a life she had stopped trying to open. Every response pulled something loose inside her. What made him dangerous wasn't charm or persistence, it was patience. He didn't push. He didn't rush intimacy. He allowed space, allowed silence, allowed her to speak without correcting her. He never told her to endure, never told her to adjust, never suggested that abuse was a misunderstanding. He said the word she had never said out loud, abuse. And when he said it, something inside her exhaled for the first time in years. When someone names your pain accurately, it can feel like rescue. Calls turned into habits, habits into dependence. Nights stretched longer. Laughter slipped out before she could stop it. Fantasies of escape grew elaborate, glowing with possibility. He spoke of a future where she wasn't afraid of footsteps or tone shifts, a life where affection didn't come bundled with fear, a life where she was chosen deliberately, not tolerated reluctantly. She didn't fall in love with him the way people imagine love. She fell in love with how she sounded when she spoke freely, with how her thoughts flowed without being edited, with the person she became in his presence, lighter, braver, more visible. That distinction mattered more than she realized, because when the illusion cracked, it took that version of herself with it. The plan started small, almost timid in its ambition. Sleeping pills slipped into tea at night, just enough to dull, just enough to guarantee hours of unconsciousness. Not to kill, never to kill. She told herself this wasn't violence, this was borrowing time, time to feel human again, time to remember that fear wasn't the only sensation available to her. Every night, doubt clenched her stomach as she stirred the cup. Every night, she promised herself it was the last time. And every morning, she woke with guilt pressing against her chest, accompanied by a treacherous sense of relief. Relief is dangerous when you've been deprived of it too long. It convinces you that whatever created it must be right. The lover began to visit, carefully, quietly. Their moments together were rushed, electric, wrapped in the kind of urgency that comes from knowing something precious is temporary. It felt like defiance, like reclaiming stolen ground, like justice delivered privately. For the first time in years, she wasn't just reacting, she was choosing. But lies don't stay contained. They expand. They demand attention. They require reinforcement. The night everything collapsed arrived without warning.
No premonition, no sign, just routine. Tea poured, pills dissolved, movements repeated with mechanical confidence. Except something shifted. Her husband didn't sink into sleep the way he usually did. Maybe the dose was wrong. Maybe his body resisted. Maybe chance finally intervened. A sound cut through the quiet, a shuffle, a door creaking open. Then shouting. The kind that annihilates fantasy on impact, the kind that exposes how fragile control really is. Love didn't feel heroic anymore. It felt incriminating. Panic flooded the room. The lover froze, eyes wide, mind racing. She didn't think. Her body acted. The brick was close, heavy, solid. One strike landed with a sound that felt wrong immediately. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just blunt and final. Another followed. The room filled with a smell she would never forget. Fear, sweat, iron. They strangled him together, not out of rage, but terror, with the shared understanding that there was no version of this night that ended cleanly. When it was done, silence poured into the space like water into a void.
In that silence, something unfamiliar surfaced. Power. Morning brought clarity sharp enough to hurt. She rehearsed her story until it felt believable even to her. An accident, a rickshaw, an iron rod. Concern expressed, help offered, refused. He slept. He didn't wake up. Tears measured carefully. Grief performed with precision. For a while it held. Then doubt seeped in. Her calm unsettled people. The way she spoke about him lacked chaos. His parents sensed something was off, not from affection, but from instinct. Police checked records. Phone numbers surfaced. Timelines tightened. The lover was traced. The post-mortem eliminated ambiguity. At the station, she didn't break the way they expected. She didn't plead, didn't deny, didn't apologize. She said she did it for love, said it like a declaration, like a shield. But love wasn't the truth. This story doesn't ask you to cheer. It asks you to think about abuse that goes unchecked, about love that feels like escape, about how silence, when ignored too long, turns violent, and about how some chains aren't broken, they're replaced. If this story stayed with you, if it unsettled you, hit like so more people hear stories that matter. Drop a comment. Was she a victim, a villain, or both? And subscribe to Taking Revenge Hour for stories where justice isn't pretty, but it's real, because some lessons are written in blood.